Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Carrington, and you're listening to Call Talk for January 13th, 2016. Holy smokes. Today's topic is workforce optimization. Now, before you go buying any WFO technology, you're going to want to listen to this show. There's two emerging changes in the contact center industry you need to know about, and we're going to talk about them today. So, if you have any questions, of course, bring them to us. You can do it either two different ways, and probably the most common way is through email. You email me at brian@benchmarkportal.com. That's spelled out BRIAN at benchmarkportal.com. Now, you can also call in if you like and get on the actual show. You dial in to 347-857-3117. Just make sure you press the number 1 on your phone to let me know that you have a question, and I'll get you right in. That number real quick, 347-857-3117. And, of course, I want to remind everyone that all of our shows are archived and available for you to listen to at any time that's good for you. And they're easy to find on our website. Go to benchmarkportal.com, scroll down near the bottom, and you'll see our Call Talk logo, and you can dive right into all the great content we have been collecting over the last 3 to 4 years the show's been going on. So, speaking of the show and going on, let's jump right into today's show, and let me introduce to you the host of Call Talk, Bruce Belfiore.
Thank you very much, Brian, and welcome back to Call Talk, everyone, and Happy New Year. This is a really important show because after a decade of relative calm over the last several years, it's become hard to keep up with technology changes in our call center industry, and especially in the workforce optimization area. But as we know, it's very important to do so because workforce optimization is an engine for efficiency in our area, and it's one that we all have to keep our eyes on. So that's why we have brought back an expert on this topic, Bill Durr, who's a veteran of this program. Bill, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Bruce. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, great. Well, I guess we didn't scare you off the first couple of times we had you on Call Talk, so that's great. For those who don't know Bill, he's an industry veteran and has held a variety of sales, marketing, and management roles for major contact center vendors and worked as a consultant for centers with challenges meeting their performance objectives. He has more than 30 years in the space, and he has practical experience with most contact center technologies, including workforce management. Bill is the author of numerous articles, white papers, and books, including books named Building a World-Class Inbound Call Center, Navigating the Customer Contact Center in the 21st Century, Customer Centricity Through Workforce Optimization, and Analytical Workforce Optimization Demystified. And this last one focuses on how workforce management and quality management are changing because of analytics. So Bill is a frequent speaker on industry events and a variety of themes, including call center productivity and quality, plus many other areas as well. So, Bill, we're really happy to have you, and one of the things I'd like to ask you is you've been involved in the contact center industry for so many years. What's the most striking characteristic of the industry in your view?
Well, there's a lot about the contact center industry that's striking, but one of the things that has really caught my attention over the years is how little things have actually changed. When you think about all the changes in technology, business models, and even society, it's amazing how little change has occurred in contact centers. We're still grappling with basic issues like what's the right service level? How much schedule adherence should we ask for? What do we do about the insane attrition rates that most centers suffer? These questions have been posed since I got into this industry some 30 years ago.
Okay, so Bill, if you've been in here so long, how come you haven't changed anything?
Well, the change isn't up to me, Bruce, but
well, this is one of those situations.
Part of the reason here is that people running contact centers like to think that there's some standard approach to success, some formula for success, and there just isn't. Contact center success depends on who and what your customers want, your company culture and the industry your company is in. There's no tried and true formula for achieving those things.
Right. So there's an awful lot of art that goes along with the science. I would definitely agree with that. Now, when we were discussing this program, you said that you felt that there were some important changes, however, that are beginning to emerge. So could you share that with our listeners?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I think the first change that I'm seeing is something that I just kind of tangentially talked about. That's contact center success, which I think is increasingly defined as operational efficiency. Is serving your customers for the lowest possible cost. So for the 30 years I've been in this industry, contact center buyers have had essentially two paths to improved operational efficiency. They buy software and hardware, and they improve the skills of the employees. So today I want to focus on that first thing, buying software and hardware. Perpetual software licenses, which is generally the way people acquire software technology these days in contact centers, is relatively costly. You put a lot of money up front. And moreover, software maintenance costs are rising such that after about 4 or 5 years, the buyers have essentially repurchased their software all over again. They spent just as much in maintenance as they did to acquire the licenses in the first place.
Okay, so just to make sure that our listeners understand that, what you're saying is there's the amount that you put down up front, and then because of the maintenance, the annual maintenance costs that you pay, after another 4 or 5 years, you've paid that amount out again, so it's like you're doubling the cost to begin with.
Right. And you do get something for that, Bruce. If the company comes up with software upgrades and new releases, sometimes you get those for free or a reduced cost. So it's not money down the drain, so to speak, but you do end up paying for it all over again, whether or not you take advantage of those upgrades or not. So, but more recently, we've seen a move towards software as a service, frequently delivered in the cloud. So, from a practical standpoint, this acquisition model removes the high upfront costs and instead imposes a monthly fee. This is a particularly attractive way to buy software for those customers whose requirements change significantly through the year. They're real seasonal kind of businesses. For example, workforce management software makes a lot of sense to be able to buy different amounts of seats on a monthly basis. So some people have referred to this model as liquor by the drink. It eliminates high upfront perpetual license costs, but the reality here is that the monthly fees begin to add up, and when you measure over 4 or 5 years, you may or may not realize much savings over the perpetual business license.
Okay, but if it's liquor by the drink, you're probably drunk enough so you don't care, right? That's. But yeah, no, I understand what. As I
said, liquor by the drink works for organizations that experience a great deal of seasonality. It makes good sense for them, but they're still paying quite a bit of money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, now, are you taking into account the savings on in-house systems administrators and savings on periodic upgrades, which are, these are typically included in the cloud-based models? And you just mentioned that you do get something for your money when you have maintenance and everything. But certainly one of the things that has been shown in some studies, in fact, is that if you have a cloud-based system, that the fact that you don't have to have all of those administrators and specialists, et cetera, means that, and you have somebody else worrying about the uptime. You have your vendor worrying about the uptime. That this actually is a great area of savings.
Well, and I won't deny that. And again, for smaller organizations that probably don't want to take on the cost associated with administrators and high-powered IT technical support people, again, the software as a service delivered to the cloud probably makes sense. But, and I haven't done a rigorous cost analysis. but I'm pretty sure there's no such thing as a free lunch. On the other hand, cloud software providers incur some costs that proprietary license vendors don't. Things like fault-tolerant servers and heavy-duty security systems, those things cost a lot of money, and you can be sure that software as a service vendors recover those costs as well as the costs for the software that they offer. But I want to point out something here. It almost doesn't matter what acquisition model a buyer chooses. There's a point that they're missing. And this is my personal opinion, but I'm starting to hear this from more and more users. At the end of the day, contact centers don't actually want to own software and hardware. The only reason that they do that is that they want to realize reduction in costs and improvements in customer loyalty and revenues. What buyers really want are outcomes and results. And I think this is the reason that managed services offerings are increasing and drawing more interest, because that's exactly what the end user is buying, results.
Right. So, interesting point. And so do you see the traditional contact center vendors changing their business models to deliver managed services?
Well, by and large, they can't afford to do that in terms of market capitalization and shareholder value. All the big contact center vendors are public companies. They have to report their revenue and profit on a quarterly basis. They literally cannot afford to change their business models in such a dramatic fashion. In fact, there's a case in point, and that's Adobe Industries. They were a proprietary software license company who announced a software as a service business model 3 or so years ago. Their stock took a beating, and so did their shareholder investors. But they've crossed a chasm, and now their stock is on an upward trajectory. So they survived the transition from proprietary to software as a service. Not very many companies are capable of making that transition successfully. So anyway, this kind of all leads to a second change I'm seeing in the industry, and I call it the rise of boutique workforce optimization vendors.
Yeah, tell us about
that. As consumers, we kind of know that all stores aren't the same. And I don't want to pick on JCPenney, but, when we go to shop there, we know exactly what we're going to get for what we pay. We don't really expect to see anything special, and we don't expect to be treated in any special way. But a boutique shop can specialize and can provide exceptional service because it chooses not to be a mass market retailer. So I think that's what a boutique workforce optimization vendor is all about. They're not so much focused on market share. They're focused on making the customers that they have successful at leveraging the technologies those customers have acquired.
Okay, that's interesting. And okay, now we're actually digging into the workforce optimization theme, which is the title of our session. And I think this will be very interesting to people. In other words, what you're saying is that rather than looking for the big name or the traditional industry partner, that they may want to look for these boutique providers who are going to be more focused on them, their idiosyncrasies, their way of doing things, and their results, rather than one of the larger providers potentially. Well, let me ask you this. How can a user recognize a boutique workforce optimization vendor?
Yeah, so I think that's probably the $64,000 question. And I've thought about this long and hard, and I think I've got one sure way to identify a real boutique WFO vendor, and that's to ask the vendor in front of you, how many salespeople are in the company, and how many implementation consultants are in the company. And I think if they answer honestly, you'll find that a market share vendor typically has a ratio of sales to consultants that can be as high as 20 to 1. 20 salespeople for every real bona fide implementation consultant in the company. Because market share vendors are focused on sales, and their investment in people is going to mirror that. Now, a true boutique WFO vendor is more likely to have a sales to consultant ratio of 1 to 1 or 2 to 1. Yeah, a consultant for every 1 or 2 sales persons. And that's because that kind of vendor is focused on your success. It really comes down to their willingness and ability to deliver results and help ensure a successful outcome.
Now, because if you have that kind of a ratio, it means you're working very closely with the client that presumably, A, doesn't want to have the technology, as you said earlier in the program, but B, also is both willing and wanting to have some hand-holding through the implementation and perhaps insights that come from a vendor who deals with the technology every day in terms of figuring out how to optimize use of that technology in their particular environment. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's pretty much the idea. It kind of also implicitly means that a boutique WFO vendor is not likely to have hundreds and hundreds of customers.
Right. They're
much more likely to have a handful of customers, new customers every year, because they're focused on them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, now, wouldn't a consultant for every salesperson or two result in higher costs to the end user? Like you said earlier, Bill, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Right. And probably, yeah, there might be some higher costs to the end user. And I think I'll just go ahead and say, so what? This is kind of like the business case for flexible scheduling, where you offer some agents a little bit more money to adopt flexible schedules. You may pay them more, but the bottom line is you save a great deal more. So, while an end user may end up paying more for the software solution from a boutique WFO vendor, if they can realize greater benefits in return, what have they really spent? So, and I guess as a final anecdotal comment, I remember a bunch of years ago when we were shooting astronauts up into space on a regular basis, one of them saying something about being a bit nervous sitting on top of a rocket that was built by the lowest cost bidder. Sometimes it's just worth spending a little more to realize a quality outcome.
That's right. Yeah, and there's that great scene in Apollo 13 where there's literally the round hole and the square peg, and they're trying to put the two together and in order to bring the guys back from space, which fortunately they do in the end. But I hear you. Well, let me ask you this then, Bill. How are the traditional contact center vendors reacting to this new breed of vendor? Do they feel threatened? And if so, what are they doing about it?
Well, I'm not sure that they feel threatened. I think some of them don't even recognize that there's this trend beginning. But one thing that I've noticed from the big name vendors, they're all kind of upping the hype. If you listen to their messages like I do out of curiosity and interest, they're pretty much telling the marketplace that whatever technology you have today just isn't enough. What you need is more technology, more solutions, more stuff. So I saw an article recently that bore this out. It used to be, when I wrote my first book about WFO technology, that workforce optimization was defined as workforce management, that's forecasting and scheduling, performance management, and quality monitoring. Just that. Not anymore. Today, the big vendors define workforce optimization as all those things plus speech and text analytics, surveys, gamification, new hire screening, top agent profiling, desktop analytics, and big data analysis. It's quite a breathtaking list, and I'm sure it will deflate almost any company's wallet considerably.
Well, that's right. I mean, I think this is what we've seen. After a certain period of calm over the last several years, those things you just mentioned have come into play, and they want to be integrated, and vendors want to see them integrated all together. And it is overwhelming for a lot of call center managers to understand, much less deal with.
Well, I totally agree. I think there's probably 200, 300,000 contact centers in the world. Yep. I could be off, by a lot, but I think that's a pretty reasonable guess. Mm-hmm. I think it's a reasonable thing to suggest that there's probably only 200 or 300 contact centers in the world that have all the technologies that the top-line WFO vendors are saying that you need in order to survive these days. But I think we're all aware of the fact that there's just thousands and thousands of contact centers today that deliver good and acceptable service to their customers every day without all those technologies. They're either really lucky, or maybe they're savvy to the fact that good customer service isn't nearly as complicated as big vendors would have you believe.
Okay. No, these are really great insights. And Bill, let me just ask you one other thing. Do you see that some of the boutique vendors are using the big vendor technology for what they do, or are they using their own technology?
Well, that's a good question, Bruce. As a matter of fact, I think the boutique WFO vendors are very often using the top-line vendors' technologies. They're partners of them, but they just have a different approach to the marketplace and a different business model. They can't afford to recreate these technologies. Those technologies cost millions and millions of dollars. So make no mistake about that.
Okay. Well, we're going to be going into questions now because we're getting toward the end of the hour. But would you mind just sort of recapping for our listeners the two big changes that you see?
Well, I think they boil down to this. Instead of proprietary software licenses or even software as a service, buyers are coming to the conclusion that what they really want are outcomes, successful outcomes. And so the second thing is they can acquire these successful outcomes by either engaging in a managed services offering from some organization, or potentially by doing business with a boutique WFO vendor. That's essentially the message I have today.
Okay. No, that's great. Thank you very much for those insights. And what I'd like to do now is turn things over to Brian, who has some questions. Brian?
Yeah, I do. Got a couple here. Came in via email. The first one is from Nancy. And Nancy asked you, Bill, I'm curious why you think the contact center industry hasn't changed very much.
Yeah, well, Nancy, I'm not sure I really know, but one thing that I've seen over and over is very few contact centers experiment. Take, for example, the question, what should my service level be? Instead of, searching on the Internet for the mythical industry standard service level, I don't understand why more contact centers don't just arbitrarily change their service level goal for a week or a month and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But nobody does that.
That's right. Well, I would peel the onion a little bit further, and maybe that's because we're benchmarkers here. But I'd say there is no industry standard. In fact, what we see is that if your definition of industry is the call center industry, because that's what most people think of as the industry standard is the old 80-20 rule, right? 80% of the calls in 20 seconds. But if you look at your industry, okay, your specific industry, what we've seen is that there are actually different expectations of people for different industries, and therefore they will be excited or disappointed by different service levels in different industries. So your expectations for your healthcare provider will be different from your expectations from your leisure services provider, et cetera. And so those expectations are an important starting point for you to have, and then you can do your own internal studies, and should do, as you said, Bill, your own internal studies, as long as you've got a good customer satisfaction measurement system that allows you to, in fact, track this and understand it. And doing a little bit of either pilot testing or overall testing can give you a lot of insights and, in many cases, save you money, because you'll find out you don't need to have as tight standards for service level or for average speed of answer as you thought you did.
You're exactly right, Bruce. And I have a personal example. Years ago, I did some consulting for an automobile insurance company, and they had looked into the so-called industry standards in the insurance industry for service levels. But when I talked to them, I discovered that they were rather specialized. They took on people who had already been kicked out of other automobile insurance companies because of their poor driving habits. So they were literally an insurance company of last resort. And so I said to them, you don't need to have the same service level goals because there's no place else for them to go.
Yeah. No, I have a story like that too. That's even more extreme. Worked with a call center company that actually provided the telephone services for prisons. So if you were a prisoner, this is your family had to go through them in order to charge your account and to be able so that you could do it. And basically, there was nowhere else to go. So anyway, okay, well, good examples. And back to you, Brian, for the next question.
Okay, sounds good. So this next one comes from Jason, and probably responding to some of the things that you said through about the second half of the show here already. And he says, asking, are you suggesting that all the new technologies aren't needed?
Well, I guess in a manner of speaking, I am. So let's take speech analytics for an example. And I've been a promoter of speech analytics myself, so I probably am going to speak out of both sides of my mouth here. But it was supposed to be able to answer questions you didn't even know that you needed to ask. and the reality is, a number of larger companies bought and implemented the technology, and they did realize some very interesting things that they didn't know they needed to ask. But, that said, the overall business case for speech analytics remains just a bit too ambiguous for a lot of contact centers. And I think that's why the uptake of speech analytics has been a little bit disappointing.
Interesting. Yeah, well, Bill Durr, the speech analytics curmudgeon, I guess we got here. Yeah, and I would agree that there's a lot of people who it is taking a long time for uptake. There are surprisingly few in number that are really embracing it and trying to squeeze it for all it's worth. What we have seen, just to add something here, is something we're working on, which has to do with sales speech analytics and what we're calling semantic selling. In a pilot, we're getting very, very good results from it, and we're trying to make it simple as well. So I think that one of the things with speech analytics is that you have to have a good idea of what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and a lot of people don't have that clear idea. So I'd agree with you on a lot of that, Bill, but I'm sort of willing to see where the world evolves and how people evolve with it. So we'll see where that goes.
Well, Bruce, I think maybe you hit the nail on the head when you said you're trying to make it simple, because if you can make it simple so that ordinary people without a lot of training and analytical skills can employ the technology, then I think it will have real value in organizations. So that's the key.
Yep.
Gotcha. I've got one more. I know we're just about to the end of the show, and Ryan emailed me this right after you did your kind of wrap-up, Bill, and talked about the two distinct changes that you're seeing in the contact center industry with WFO. And the question is from Ryan: can you expand on your opinion that end users don't want to buy software anymore, that they want to buy results?
Well, I'll try. I think it comes down to this. Contact center management has been buying software solutions ever since I've been involved, for 30 years. But by a lot of articles, reports, and studies, things haven't gotten noticeably better. Customers perhaps are demanding more, but at the end of the day, things just haven't gotten better. So I think the problem lies not in the software itself, but in the end user's ability to utilize it fully. And it kind of gets back to what Bruce and I just bantered about with speech analytics. Sometimes the technologies are simply more complicated than the vendors are willing to admit. I live in workforce management for a long time, and you just can't become proficient at that with 1 week of vendor training. So it may make much better sense to hire a vendor to do it all, and that's called managed services. Or to get involved again with a boutique WFO vendor who can spend the time training your people so that they can get full value out of that software.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's a great piece of advice there. And if you do decide that you're going to try to do it yourself, then do get the adequate level of vendor training, because so many folks don't. And my tip is called double and drip. In other words, if they suggest, for example, 1 week of training, then put in your contract you want 2 weeks of training, at least, and then for the part that you've added on, space it out or drip it out over a period of a few months so that you can go back to them and make sure that they train you adequately and that you get to ask all the questions that you want. Because we oftentimes see that people don't do that. They sort of don't know what they don't know, and they don't ask. And if it's actually written into your contract that you're not only going to have the initial training, but they have to talk to you on a periodic basis thereafter, then that's a great way of making sure you're squeezing the lemon for all the lemonade you can. I don't know. Do you have a sense of that as well, Bill?
Well, that's a terrific idea, Bruce. I'd never heard of the concept double and drift, but I think that should be on everybody's lips. Okay, very good. Thank you. All right. Well, great. This has been a wonderful episode. In fact, we've gone over time, but I think it's been well worth it. And, Bill, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us again. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to the next time. Let's not make it so many years. Okay, very good. Brian, back over to you to wrap things up.
All right. Well, thanks, you guys. Appreciate all the insight and great conversation through the show today. And I do want to remind everyone to join us next month. We've got another great show coming up. Look at our huge selection of our archive shows in between. And we have all sorts of different topics from over 5 seasons that we've been putting together, Call Talk. And that's at our website, BenchmarkPortal.com. So, with that being said, from all of us here at Benchmark Portal, keep those headsets steady and your fingers ready. This is Brian Carrington signing out. Have a great day. That's a wrap. Good luck with your WFO in the contact center. Take care.